We start underwater, as a group of stunningly diverse interracial mermaids gather for a special ceremony, which is hosted by some sort of transsexual mermaid fella with a
great big bushy beard.
But he's pretty pissed that he's just made such a cool entrance despite his youngest daughter Ariel not even having bothered to show up. So naturally, he summons a talking Jamaican crab called Sebastian to go bring her butt home already. And before he can say, how the frig are they talking underwater, this Crabastian chap heads off to find her, and turns out she's pissing about exploring old shipwrecks on the ocean floor with some fishy fella called Flanders. Oops, I mean Flounders. Turns out she's a young princess, and the first black female mermaid with ginger dreadlocks for some reason. And looking to add some new things to her collection of human trinkets, she picks up a lost piece of cutlery and says that's the smallest trident I've ever seen. Which totally gives me flashbacks to my Tinder date last week, who said the exact same thing about my own solid tool, right before rating my profile 2 stars. Liberties! Anyway, they're soon attacked by a giant fuck-off shark, and before you can say, where's Jason Statham when you need him, we're introduced to some northern gannet bird called Scuttle, who talks like a painfully unfunny Asian comedian from Queens for some reason, and thus subjecting the audience to the 2 most annoying characters with grating voices since literally any of the characters in Big Bang Theory.
You suck.
Anyway, after moaning about how her dad won't let her go visit the human surface world, given they apparently killed her mum years ago, that Crabastian fella totally drags her scaly butt home, while some chubby half-octopus woman what lives with a pair of eels and thinks of as her baby since she's essentially a crazy spinster cat lady, whines about not being invited to the Coral Moon ceremony given she's been in exile for 15 years, and plans to exploit Princess Ariel to get her to her brother's crown of power. Or some shit. And the hairy male king mermaid fella with a
great big bushy beard
totally bollocks her for being obsessed with the human world, and orders the Caribbean crab to spy on her at all times to ensure she don't do any more than bad things. So she goes back to her underwater bedroom to have a little sulk and then play around with a collection of human trash, before proceeding to whine about all her problems in the form of a shit song. But suddenly, she spots some colourful lights at the top of her cave hole. So she totally defies her dad's orders and soon breaches the surface, where she watches some giant fuck-off fireworks and totally pervs over a drunk young prince called Eric like a right creepy weirdo. Also suddenly, the entire ship goes up in flames because reasons, and after everyone abandons said ship and gets the heck out of Dodge, Eric goes back to save a small dog, and because no good deed goes unpunished in this world, he soon gets thrown overboard and knocked unconscious for his troubles. Luckily, the first black mermaid with gingivitis totally saves him from falling down into the depths of Davy Jones's locker, and then lays him on a small beach and just rubs him till liquid comes out. Steady! Also luckily, it totally brings him back to life, while she uses her special siren voice to serenade him and she. And this time, her singing is so bad that a bunch of blokes run down a hill with flaming torches just to shut her up already. And after that chubby squiddy witch does some more evil scheming, Crabastian also bollocks her for going up to the human world and making him have to lie to his transsexual boss.
Bruh.
So he sings her a classic Disney song about how good they have it under the sea, and how they're totally not going to get eaten and shit like in the surface world, despite Ariel and Flounders almost getting munched up by a shark just 10 minutes earlier in the opening of the film.
No!
Elsewhere, over in the human realm, that Prince Eric fella is banging on about some fishy tart what totally rescued him from becoming a floating turd. But his adoptive queen mother thinks he's gone full Alex Jones talking about top totty chocolate girls living underwater without legs and shit, and totally forbids him to go back to the seas to look for this pretty fishy rando. And after he also goes and has a sulk by singing a Ponzi song of his own, the transsexual mermaid king goes into a right rage about the surface dwellers polluting their underwater home and shit, cause coming over here and crashing their boats into our precious coral reefs just ain't fucking onza. And after Ariel swims off in a strop and decides she don't want to hang out with her diverse sisters, what are somehow all different ethnicities because reasons and also corporate woke agendas, the king asks his right-hand crab about what's been going on since he sent him to spy on his own teenage daughter. And Sebastian totally cucks when his boss applies just the slightest bit of pressure, and tells him all about her little trip to the surface world where she watched some fireworks and then saved a generic white man from a deadly shipwreck and shit. Naturally, the first transsexual mermaid fella with a
Great big bushy beard.
is friggin' furious, and smashes up her collection of human crap as a punishment for disobeying him and thinking not all humans are that bad after all. Now more miserable than an ageing feminist, she gets a visit from a chubby octo witch inside a small bubble, who says she's her Auntie Ursula, and although her dad always said his sis is a bit of a wrong'un who likes to stir up trouble all the time, said Auntie insists that she's totally cool, bro, and thereby manipulates her worse than a Disney child star. And once back at her lair, Ariel is presented with the deal of a lifetime. And I don't mean a 2-for-1 offer on bacon and cheese wraps at her local Broncho Greg's.
Get in my belly.
But rather that this Ursula broad will temporarily take her super sonorous singing voice and turn her into one of them human peeps for 3 days. And if she seduces a bloke and receives a little smooch from a true love, she'll totally get to remain human indefinitely. But if she fails, she'll revert to being a basic black mermaid with ginger dreadlocks and a fishy tail. And worse, Ursula will totally claim her soul and she... So this naive naughty numpty totally jumps at the chance of getting back to her first ever boyfriend, what she only met for 2 minutes the other day, and totally can't wait to spread her human legs to experience that sex thing, what she keeps reading about on Tumblr and also in the local library and shit. So Ursula completes her wicked spell and totally steals her voice, and before you can say, I wish they'd do that to them 2 annoying CG animals with a grating accent already, she sends her on her way, and once above in the surface world, Ariel soon realises that she's magically grown a pair of them feet things like what you walk about with and buy overpriced pics of from OnlyFans skanks and shit. And that devious Ursula bird totally gloats about putting something extra in the spell, which involves making her forget about a key aspect of their deal, about needing to get a quick peck from her lover boy before the 3 days are up. Gah, what a bitch. Anyway, after the locals clean her up and she starts munching on a bar of soap because comedy, bro, she starts bloody singing again. And before you can say, I thought that Ursula bird just stole her voice so we wouldn't have to put up with any more of this musical shite, she reunites with Prince Eric, who promptly gives her a right raging lady boner. But turns out she only loses her voice when she's around him, so she can't really tell him to his face all about the ways in which he tickles her pickles. Or some shit. Anyway, Sebastian turns up and agrees to help her court that generic Caucasian what loves saving canines from burning boats. But because of that spell thing, she totally can't remember said spell thing where she needs to get smooching already. So instead just falls asleep like a moody teenager and totally wastes the rest of the day. The next morning, Prince Eric catches that aerial bird checking out his own collection of human crap. And naturally, they totally bond over their shared hobby and love of cheap tat. And he soon starts to wonder why he's doing all the talking. But then he remembers that she's a girl of few words, which he's totally fine with, to be fair. Cause much like Chris Brown, he quite likes light-skinned girls who don't talk back.
Damn!
Anyway, he eventually feels so awkward that he ends up blowing his own horn. Though he's probably used to doing that at the end of an evening if this is his idea of a first date. So they do some more bonding with the help of that fishy flounders fella, the CGI Sebastian chap, and the endlessly annoying Scuttlebird bird. And whilst romantically under the moonlight, he tries to guess her name. And before he can say, I think your name's wifey material, he soon goes in for the all-coveted kiss. But in a shocking twist, what no one could ever see coming, Ursula sends her 2 pet eels to totally cock-block him. And she's so pissed that she vows to make even more magical potions so she can totally secure her magical bargain and totally rig it worse than the US presidential election. I mean, rig it worse than the Brazilian presidential election. Totally win her free and fair contest fair and square and she... And later that night, Prince Eric gets lured out to the beach by a beautiful song. And no, I don't mean cha-cha slide real smooth.
Take it back now, y'all. One hop this time. Cha-cha real smooth.
But the irresistible call of a siren. And he's soon besotted by the random white woman what he's just come across on a small rock. The next morning, we fast forward through the most ear-splitting obnoxious song since Friday by Rebecca Black back in the day.
Friday, Friday, getting down on Friday.
Fuck you!
Well, at least I did, so I can't really tell you what the song was about. But later on, Prince Eric tells his phony fakey Black Queen mummy that he's now going to marry some basic bitch what he found just dumped out on a small rock in the sea like yesterday's turd. Because she's totally his one true love, isn't she? And after the Scuttlebird bird discovers that said basic bitch is none other than that devious Auntie Ursula in disguise and then totally tells the gang, they rush off to try and stop the sham engagement, which they totally do, and the girls then proceed to have a little cat fight, which results in Ariel's voice being returned and me currently battling a raging Larbon. Anyway, with her memory and voice now restored, they go in for the final kiss already. But unfortunately, it's a bit too late once the sun goes down and her fishy tail grows back. And the humans just can't believe they were about to marry an interspecies couple engaging in what is technically bestiality and shit. Until Auntie Ursula rugby tackles that Ariel girl off the cliff and back into the sea. And it looks like it's curtains for the first black mermaid with terrible acting skills. But luckily, her trans daddy appears and totally confronts his naughty sister. But the chubby squiddy witch ain't really scared of some transsexual mermaid fella with a
Great big bushy beard.
and promptly threatens to yeet her own niece, which thereby convinces him to do one of them self-sacrifice things and promptly hands over his crown and trident, before she uses her pet electric eel things to totally crispy fry him to death. Some shit. But then Prince Eric soon appears, and she's completely distraught after her eels get exploded real good and proper. Because she saw them as her babies, given she's essentially the equivalent of a middle-aged cat lady without proper kids, aka your typical modern feminist. So naturally, she becomes some sort of Cthulhu-type kraken creature and soon sets about killing our heroes. But a rather resourceful Ariel uses the pointy spike of her resurfaced shipwreck to totally impale her naughty auntie, and ends her wicked schemes once and for all. Luckily, the released Triton also resurrects her deaded trans daddy because reasons. And they totally thank each other for sacrificing their lives and fighting to save each other, but they're not even having a little hug. The next day, said newly resurrected king soon has one of them epiphany things, and totally thinks his daughter would look much better with a pair of legs and a joyous smile. So he sends her back up to the surface to go marry that pussy old white boy what was so easily tricked by a simple love spell. And they finally get to have their sloppy sucky smooch, what they've been trying to do for the whole bloody film. And what is so powerful that it even makes her own hair blush and seemingly turn redder in the sun. And we end with a beachfront wedding, which sounds super expensive to be fair, as their marriage finally unites the two worlds of surface dwellers and underwater fish people. And speaking of, Prince Eric just can't believe his eyes when he sees a hairy mermaid man just bobbing about in the sea like a giant turd but with a
Great big bushy beard.
And before he can say, "Are you here to pay your half of the wedding?" the king just finally hugs his fishy kid and says he'll always be there for her, and so will her mer family. As a whole flock of stunningly diverse interracial merpeeps suddenly surface to watch them all sail off to explore the world and she. And that's it. That's the movie. But man, why was this film so dark, bro? And I don't just mean the terrible murky lighting, but more like, why did the message of all this seemingly be that you can only be happy by pretending to be something you're not? I.e., by modifying your body, rejecting your heritage, and then making a new life in a foreign world that you don't understand and don't really belong in. And why does Scuttle keep eating fish right in front of his mate Flounders? Because, for some strange reason, only specific underwater creatures seem to be all singing sentient life forms in this film. And unless you're part of the main cast, it seems like you're just doomed to be a mindless, brain-dead Mogadon and shit.
Oh, really? That sucks.
Though my favourite part was the total lack of the classic shell bra, because joyless feminism, bro. But anyway, that's the plot and that's your lot. Considering in that mail thing so you don't miss any future recaps. Tell me if you like this flick in the comments, if you have time. And I'll see you in the next one.